GPS told me to take the highway, but my hands turned onto Route 9 without asking my brain first. Muscle memory, I guess. Or maybe something older than that. The kind of thing that happens when a place has had you longer than you've had yourself. I hadn't been back to Millhaven in 4 years, not since my grandmother's funeral, which my sister-in-law managed to make about herself in ways I still don't fully understand. I told myself every year that I'd come back for something smaller, something quieter. A regular Sunday, a holiday that didn't matter, but somehow the right moment never appeared, and the years just kept stacking. My brother's architecture award ceremony wasn't something I could skip. He called me himself, which he almost never does. We text mostly, short things. Links to articles he thinks I'll like, photos of his dog. Hearing his actual voice on the phone made me sit up straight. "It's the State Heritage Award," he said. "They're doing this whole thing at the Whitmore Center. I know it's a drive." "I'll be there," I said. I didn't tell him what I'd been doing for the past 4 years, not the details. He knew I'd left my old firm in Philadelphia, knew I'd moved around some. I'd let him think it was freelance work. Consulting. The vague language of someone who didn't want to explain herself. It wasn't lying. It just wasn't the whole picture. The whole picture was that I'd been recruited into a federal infrastructure resilience program 18 months after leaving my old firm. The kind of program that doesn't have a flashy name. The kind where your title sounds boring on purpose. I was a senior design advisor, technically. What that meant practically was that I sat in rooms with people who held a lot of power and told them which bridges were going to fail and why, and sometimes they listened. I wasn't famous. I wasn't on the news. I gave no TED Talks. I drove a 7-year-old Subaru and wore the same 4 blazers in rotation. But I knew things. I'd helped approve the retrofit on the Allegheny Crossing. I'd flagged the foundational problem at the Davenport site 2 years before anyone else caught it. I had security clearance I couldn't discuss at dinner parties, which meant I didn't go to many dinner parties. None of that mattered in Millhaven. In Millhaven, I was still just my brother's younger sister who'd gone off to the city and never really come back. I pulled into the parking lot of the Whitmore Center at 6:45. The building was nicer than I remembered. Someone had done renovation work on the facade, new stonework, better lighting. I sat in the car for a moment and watched couples and families walk in through the glass doors. Women in heels, men in blazers. The particular energy of a small city formal event, where everyone knows someone and the knowing is the whole point. I'd worn a navy dress and flats. My hair was up. I looked fine. Not remarkable. That was intentional. Inside, the lobby smelled like old carpet and fresh flowers, the combination that exists only in civic buildings trying to upgrade their dignity. I found the registration table and gave my name. The volunteer, a teenager in a too large blazer, searched for me on the list and looked briefly confused. "Nora Callahan," I offered. "Oh yes, here." He handed me a lanyard, guest of recipient, not a seat at the main table. "Fine." I found my brother near the far wall talking to 2 men in suits who had the easy posture of people comfortable with their own importance. He saw me and his whole face changed. That specific relief of someone who wasn't sure you'd actually show up. "You made it," he said, and hugged me in that slightly awkward way we've always hugged, both of us patting each other's backs like we're burping someone. "Told you I would." He introduced me to the 2 men whose names I immediately forgot, and then his wife materialized at his elbow. "My sister-in-law's name is Sherry. We have known each other for 11 years. In those 11 years, she has never once looked at me the way she looks at her husband's colleagues' wives, with warmth, with genuine interest, with the social grace she deploys like a professional tool. With me, there is always a slight pause, a recalibration. Like she's deciding which version of polite to use. Nora." She kissed my cheek. Her perfume was the same as always. Something expensive and assertive. "You look tired. Was the drive okay?" "Fine," I said. 2.5 hours. "You should have come yesterday." "I kept telling your brother to tell you to come yesterday. You could have stayed with us, but..." She shrugged, meaning, "But you didn't, and that's on you." I smiled and nodded and looked for a waiter with drinks. The room filled up. I found my seat round table near the middle, mixed company, the kind of seating arrangement designed to encourage conversation among strangers. an older couple to my left who farmed outside of town, a woman about my age who worked for the county planning office, a retired teacher who'd had my brother in 8th grade and wanted me to know he'd always been talented. It was fine. It was the kind of fine that takes effort. Sherry circulated the room with the practiced ease of someone who understood that her husband's professional success was also her social currency. She stopped at tables, touched arms, laughed at the right moments. She was good at it. I don't say that as a criticism. It's a real skill. I just don't have it. At one point, she came back to the table where I was sitting, refilling her water glass, and caught the tail end of a conversation I was having with the county planner about the Millhaven Bridge project, the pedestrian overpass they'd been trying to fund for 3 years. The load analysis keeps coming back wrong, I was saying. The original soil survey was done before the floodplain shifted. They need to redo it before they go anywhere near the foundation permits. The planner was nodding with the particular intensity of someone who had been thinking the same thing, but hadn't had the vocabulary for it. Sherry leaned in slightly. Are you still doing that consulting thing? Something like that, I said. It's just. She smiled, the smile of someone who believes they're being helpful. I always thought it was a shame you left your real job, the firm in Philadelphia. You were doing so well there and then you just. She made a little gesture with her hand. Scattered, like seeds off a dandelion. Things change, I said. Of course they do. She patted my shoulder, and honestly, the flexible lifestyle suits some people. I think it's great that you've made it work. The planner was looking at her water glass. I said nothing. This is the thing I have learned. In the years I have been doing the work I do, the people who need you to be smaller are usually the ones who are most frightened of the room. Sherry wasn't malicious, she was territorial. My brother was her achievement, and I was a variable she'd never quite been able to categorize, and unclassifiable things made her anxious. I understood this. It didn't make the shoulder pat feel better. The ceremony started at 7:30. The room settled, the lights warmed, and the director of the State Heritage Foundation took the podium. She was a small woman with an enormous voice and the kind of glasses that suggested she had spent a long time being underestimated. I liked her immediately. There were 4 awards that evening. My brother's was 3rd. It was for the restoration work he'd done on the Caldwell Mill complex, a 19th-century industrial site that had been 3 months from demolition when he proposed his adaptive reuse plan. He'd fought for it for 2 years, attended every city council meeting, revised the proposal 4 times. The building was now a community arts center with original timber framing and geothermal heating. When they called his name, I clapped until my hands hurt. He gave a short speech, the kind that was grateful without being sycophantic, and mentioned our parents, which made me look at the tablecloth for a moment. Our mother had died 6 years ago. Our father lived in Arizona now, a fact that still felt geographically improbable. After the main awards, there was a reception period. The room loosened, people moved around, the bartenders got busier. I had found a spot near the window with a glass of white wine that I wasn't really drinking, mostly because I was driving back tonight and partially because I didn't want anything to blur the edges. Sherry found me there around 8:15. She had been drinking more than me, I could tell, not visibly drunk, just amplified. The volume of herself turned up slightly. I need to ask you something, she said, and I hope you won't take it the wrong way. I waited. Are you okay? Like, genuinely. Because your brother worries about you. He doesn't say it, but I know him and he worries. You're out there doing this. She searched for the word. This independent thing, and you never really talk about it, and we don't know if you're stable, financially. Whatever. I'm stable, I said. Because if you ever needed help. I don't. I'm just saying it as family. Sherry, I said it quietly without heat. I appreciate the thought. I'm okay. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't fully read. Then she said, I just think it's hard for people who knew you when. You had so much potential. Your professors all said so. And now? Another little gesture. It's just hard to watch, is all. She walked away before I could respond, which was probably fortunate. I stood at the window and looked at the parking lot lights. Hard to watch. It's hard to watch. I thought about the meeting I'd had 3 weeks ago, the Department of Transportation headquarters in Washington. The one where I'd presented the failure probability modeling for 11 aging structures in the Mid-Atlantic corridor. The one where 2 senior officials had argued about my recommendations for 40 minutes before one of them finally said flatly, "She's right." We all know she's right. The one where I'd been handed a security badge at the door with my name and a designation I can't repeat in casual conversation. I thought about the call I'd gotten last year from a colleague in Geneva, asking if I'd consider consulting on a bridge project in southern France, the dinner I'd had with the state governor who'd wanted my personal read on his infrastructure bond proposal, the paper I'd published in a journal that approximately 400 people in the country read, and that those 400 people treated like a roadmap. Potential, past tense. I finished my wine. The reception was winding toward its natural end when I saw him across the room. I recognized him immediately, though it took my brain a second to place him outside of the professional context. He was tall, silver-haired, the build of someone who had been athletic once and hadn't entirely let it go. He was wearing a dark suit and talking to the director of the Heritage Foundation, with the ease of someone who did not need anything from this room. His name was Howard Greer. He was the deputy director of the Federal Infrastructure Resilience Program, my program, technically, though he sat 4 levels above me on the organizational chart. He was the person who had signed off on my original appointment. We had been in perhaps 8 or 9 meetings together over the past 3 years, and he had once described my Davenport analysis as the most important document produced by this office in a decade, which I'd had to read twice because I thought I'd misunderstood him. I had not expected him to be here. He lived in Alexandria. He had no obvious reason to be at a Heritage Architecture Award ceremony in Mill Haven, Pennsylvania. He saw me at roughly the same moment I registered him. The recognition crossed his face, not the vague courtesy recognition of someone placing a colleague, but the immediate, genuine kind. He said something brief to the director, touched her arm in a polite "excuse me," and walked toward me. Behind me, slightly to my left, Sherry was talking to someone. I felt her awareness shift when she saw a man of his bearing moving deliberately in my direction. "Nora," he said, extending his hand, "I had no idea you'd be here." "My brother received the Heritage Award tonight," I said. "Howard, this is a surprise." "My wife grew up in Mill Haven, actually. We come back for her parents most summers." He smiled, a real one, not a function smile. "I saw your name in the program. Guest of recipient. I almost came to find you earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt." "You could have." "You were talking to Janet Park from County Planning. She needed that conversation more than I did." He shook his head slightly. "I keep hearing your name everywhere. The DOT briefing last month. I had 3 people ask me if I knew you. The report wasn't that unusual. Nora, the modeling you did on the Hartwell interchange alone is going to save the state of Maryland approximately $240 million in emergency repairs that would have happened in 6 years. 240. That's not unusual. That's extraordinary." I was very aware of the stillness that had developed in my immediate vicinity, the way conversations lose a thread when something interrupts the ambient noise of a room. "I didn't realize you'd seen the final numbers on that," I said. "I pushed for the full impact assessment specifically because I wanted it documented." He paused. "Are you happy where you are?" "I only ask because there's a position coming open that I don't want to do this at a party. Can I send you something Monday?" "Of course." "Good." He looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who was deciding whether to say the next thing. Then he said it. "You know, when I was talking to the secretary's team last month, they asked me to name the 3 people in our division whose work had been most consequential in the past 5 years. I named you first. You were the first name I said. I want you to know that." The room was very quiet in my immediate radius. "Thank you," I said, and then because it was true and because I had learned to accept things that were true, that means a great deal to me. He stayed another few minutes, asked about the bridge my brother had received the award for, listened with genuine interest when I explained the adaptive reuse concept. Then his wife appeared, a warm woman with paint on her left wrist, that she hadn't fully scrubbed off, and they made their way toward the exit. I turned back to the window. Sherry was standing 3 feet away. She had not moved since Howard Greer walked over. Her glass was in her hand, and she was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't embarrassment exactly. It was the look of someone who has been using a map and has just realized the map is wrong. "Who was that?" she said. "My boss," I said, roughly speaking. From your consulting?" "From my job," I said. "The one I've had for the past 3 years." She didn't say anything. "The flexible lifestyle," I said, not unkindly. "It suits me." I went to find my brother to say goodbye. He was near the door with 2 colleagues, still glowing from the evening in the way people glow when something they worked for a long time finally gets seen. I hugged him, the patting hug, the familiar one. "You should have told me what you were actually doing," he said quietly into my shoulder. "You never asked." "I'm asking now." "I'll tell you," I said. "Monday. I'll call you Monday and tell you the whole thing." He pulled back and looked at me. He had our mother's eyes. He always had. "Proud of you," he said. "Proud of you too," I said. "The mill building is beautiful." I looked it up before I came. I looked at all the photos. "Did you actually?" "Every single one." Outside, the night was cooler than the afternoon had promised. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. The parking lot was draining slowly, couples walking to their cars, the quiet collapse of a formal evening back into ordinary life. I thought about what Howard had said. The first name I said. I hadn't gone into this work to be first anything. I'd gone into it because there was a problem, a real, structural, concrete problem with the way the country thought about its own infrastructure. And I had a specific skill set that mapped onto that problem. That was the whole story. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't make for good small talk. There was no way to explain it at a family dinner without either underselling it or sounding like you were trying too hard. So I'd stopped explaining. But sitting in that parking lot in Millhaven, with the lights of the Whitmore Center still on behind me and Route 9 ahead of me, and 4 years of quiet, unremarkable, consequential work behind all of it, I thought that maybe the not explaining had cost me something, not with Sherry, with my brother. He'd looked relieved when Howard walked over. Not surprised by my success, exactly. Relieved that there was proof. And that was partly on me, that he'd needed proof. I started the car. The radio came on mid-song, something old, something that had been popular when I was in college. I let it play. Route 9 took me back past the house I grew up in. I didn't slow down. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it looked like. The porch light on the timer, the oak tree that had split in the ice storm of 2019 and been cut back to something stubby and new, the mailbox with the reflector my father had put on when I was 9. I drove past it. And then I was on the highway, and Millhaven was behind me, and the work was ahead of me, and both of those things were exactly what they were supposed to be. I keep thinking about the word potential, how Sherry used it like a eulogy. She wasn't trying to be cruel. That's the part I've had to sit with. She genuinely believed she was being kind, offering me a soft landing, a sympathetic witness. She'd looked at my life and assembled a story from the pieces she could see. And the story she built was one about a woman who had once been promising and had since drifted. And in her version, that was sad. In her version, she felt sorry for me. What I've come to understand is that the stories people tell about you in your absence are almost never about you. They're about the narrator. Sherry needed me to be the cautionary tale because it made the life she'd built feel more intentional by comparison. That's not malice. That's just the quiet arithmetic people do when they're measuring their own choices against someone else's. The harder thing, the thing I didn't expect to feel in that parking lot, was the understanding that I had let it happen. Not Sherry's assumptions. Those were hers to carry. But my brother's uncertainty. That one was on me. I had been so committed to working without an audience, so practiced at keeping my head down and letting the work speak for itself, that I had forgotten that the people who love you sometimes need to hear from you directly. Not because they doubt your competence, because they miss you. Because silence, even principled silence, can look a lot like distance from the outside. There's something I believe now that I didn't fully believe in my 20s, that genuine integrity is not the same as invisibility. Doing the right thing quietly, doing it well, doing it without seeking recognition, that matters. That's the foundation. but there is no virtue in letting people who love you worry for 4 years, because you were too proud to pick up the phone and say, "This is what I've been doing, this is why it matters, I'm okay." Howard Greer walked across that room because he recognized me. He recognized me because I had spent 3 years doing work that was honest, specific, and difficult, work that held up under scrutiny because it had been done carefully, not impressively. That kind of recognition doesn't come from self-promotion. It comes from the accumulated weight of showing up again and again and doing the thing correctly. That's the only math that has ever worked in my experience. There is no shortcut that bypasses it. But the moment I remember most from that evening isn't Howard. It's my brother in the doorway saying he was proud of me, and the way I felt. Not vindicated, not victorious, just relieved. Relieved that we were still close enough that it mattered. Relieved that 4 years of distance hadn't calcified into something permanent. The drive home was quiet. No big revelations, just Route 9 and then the highway and the radio playing something old. I called my brother on Monday like I said I would. I told him everything.